be a screw, feel my own adrenaline. Yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the fourth part of, What If Issei, Rias Meet Ben 10. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Dragneel Giant 96 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The next day, Ben leant back on the bench he was occupying and stared up at the appealing, cloudless sky and took a deep breath as he admired the view. Even though this wasn't what he had planned for today, it wasn't all that bad really. His plan for this Saturday had been a simple one. He had planned to enjoy what little spare time he had that wasn't composed of either school or devil work and just relax for a bit. Don't get the wrong idea, Ben really enjoyed learning all there was to know about being a devil. There was always so much more to know, but there was still quite a bit of work he had to do more so when more people started summoning him for pacts. Because of this, Ben had planned to stay in his room and do whatever it was he felt like doing, be it playing his guitar, playing some of his video games, or even doing nothing at all and simply play on his phone a bit. It wasn't glamorous or particularly riveting, but it was something he was looking forward to. Until his mother put a stop to it. As if sensing when he was at his most content, she had called him down and ordered him, technically, she asked him to help but Ben read between the lines, to do a few little jobs for her while he wasn't doing anything important. The last job she'd given him had been a combination of dropping off a letter for her and stopping off at a local store to return something that she had bought there. This was the series of events that culminated with Ben admiring the clear sky while sitting on a bench beside a community area with a large dirt patch that was used for football games between local children. Across from him were two children currently having said game against each other while their mother sat on the other side of the area and fixed on something fascinating on her phone screen. His eyes slowly turned away from the sky and fell down to look at his left arm. He'd tried to speak to Asmith again last night once he'd recovered most of his strength again but it didn't matter, Asmith remained silent and unresponsive. Why won't you talk to me, he mentally wondered as he gently clenched and unclenched his fist. Are you waiting for me to do something? Oh wow. Thud ouch, a cute, female voice cried out from his left. Ben glanced up and over at the sound to see a prone blonde-haired figure sprawled out on the floor a few feet from him, a large brown suitcase beside her open with several of its contents having fallen out. As his eyes fell on her, he averted them quickly when he noted that, in the young woman's fall, her dress had ridden up and now left a white pair of panties exposed to the open air. Deliberately looking at everywhere except her exposed panties, Ben quickly took in the rest of her clothing and blanched when he realized what he was looking at lying on her face and groaning in pain. She wore a dark teal habit with light blue accents, a white veil with light blue accents, a light brown satchel which was slung over her left shoulder and leaning against her right hip, and a pair of brown boots with straps that crossed over each other in an X-shaped pattern. It didn't take a genius to recognize what she was. A nun. What's a nun doing here? As she began picking herself up off the floor, Ben returned to the present and leapt to his feet. Sure shoot. Are you all right? He asked as he rushed over to help her up, catching himself before he cursed in front of a nun. He took hold of her right hand and shoulder and gently helped her up. Oh, thank you very much, she thanked him, taking hold of his hand proper as she returned to her feet and looked up at her helper. Her face which, until that very moment, had been covered by her veil when she tripped fell away and Ben couldn't help but take a sharp intake of breath when he saw her face. She was an extremely pretty young woman with strikingly appealing green eyes that transfixed him when he looked into them. Her blonde hair cascaded down her back until it reached her waist, split bangs exposed her forehead and, oddly enough, a single strand that stuck out from the top and sloped backwards. He realized he was staring too much when her face started turning red in embarrassment. "Ah, sorry about that," he apologized, averting his eyes which landed on her partially open suitcase. "Let me help you with that." "Ooh, please don't worry about that," she squeaked in embarrassment as he knelt down and began putting things back in. "I can handle it myself. It's fine. I don't mind helping." "No, please. You don't have to, wait, you can understand me." Yeah," Ben replied, confused by the weird question, as he continued to help her return her belongings back into her suitcase. Before long, everything had been returned and the case had been closed again. "Thanks so much for your help," she babbled timidly. "So cute," Ben thought before gesturing to her luggage. "You visiting Ko?" "Ah, not exactly. I'm actually here to start working in this town's church, but I got a little lost while looking for it. I've also been having trouble because nobody understands what I'm saying." It dawned on Ben at that moment that she was speaking English. "Why didn't I notice that?" he thought before recalling Rias explaining some of the things he could do now he was a devil, one such thing being an ability to translate any language he heard into something he could understand, an ability which worked both ways and anybody talking to him would hear whatever language they can understand. "Sorry to hear that. Luckily for me, though, I can speak both English and Japanese." "Really? That's a relief. Would you like me to escort you to the church?" he asked, suddenly feeling the urge to help her. From the torn look on her face, Ben could tell she was the sort of person who wouldn't ask for help because she didn't want to bother anyone, yet she was also anxious due to the fact she was still lost and would struggle to get to where she needs to go. If it isn't too much trouble," she mumbled cutely, hiding her embarrassed face from him. "Not at all." Glad to help, Ben smiled, feeling butterflies swirl around inside him when she returned her own bright smile. The blonde-haired nun took hold of the silver cross necklace hanging around her neck and held it close to her chest, an innocent yet captivating twinkle in her eyes. "You must have been sent to me from the Lord. Thank you God for helping me on my journey." Zap. "Gah!" Ben exclaimed as he felt the familiar knives returning in his head and clutched it before he knew it. "Not again." The nun noticed this and her expression immediately turned to one of concern for him. "Oh no. Are you alright? Do you need help?" she asked sweetly, still holding the small cross in her hands. Ben cleared his throat before answering. "It's fine. I'm alright." He stifled another cough before continuing. "Well, shall we get going then?" "Yes, let's," she replied cutely, her bright smile returning to her face for a moment before it quickly vanished when Ben bent down and picked up her suitcase, throwing it on his left shoulder. "Please. You don't have to do that. It's my luggage. Let me do it." Is there anything she does that isn't cute? It's fine really. You must have been struggling with this before, right? The look on her face told him that he was correct in his assessment of her previous struggle, yet she was still overcome by him helping her so much. "By the way, my name's Ben Tennyson. What's yours?" "My name's Asia. Asia Argento. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ben." "The pleasure's all mine." "Come on, let's get going," Ben stated with a nod of his head before he started to head where she needed to go. They made it a full 5 steps before. Thud. Wah. The two of them looked over to see one of the boys playing on the football pitch had tripped over and had landed on his knee, which left a scuffed knee which was bleeding slightly. Within the blink of an eye, the young nun was already rushing over to the injured boy and knelt down in front of him and looking at him kindly. "Come on now, boys shouldn't cry over little scrapes like this. Here, let me help you," she told him sweetly before raising her hands and placing them just above the boy's bloody knee. Ben's eyes widened when Asia's hands started glowing bright green, the pale impressions of rings appearing on her middle fingers. The light lasted a few more seconds before fading away to reveal the boy's knee had been completely healed, causing Ben's eyes to widen further. Whoa, what was that? Interesting. Asmitha's voice rippled through Ben's head before quickly retreating back into his sacred gear before Ben could try and speak to him, not that he could currently when there were normal humans nearby. There we go. All better, the blonde-haired beauty announced sweetly. Kaito. What happened? The boy's mother demanded, the other boy following close behind her. I fell over. This lady, she made her hand go all glowy and made the pain go away, the boy, Kaito, responded, gesturing to the nun. It was just a simple healing spell, Asia dismissed shyly. The boy's mother stared at her for a moment before taking the boy's arm forcefully and dragging him back to his feet. Kaito. You shouldn't get involved with strange people. Come on, we're leaving, she announced sternly before dragging both children away at a brisk pace. Ben scowled at the woman's rudeness and started walking after her. Hey lady. How about a thank you? She was helping your kid. No, it's fine. Asia told him, holding onto his free arm with both hands in a bid to stop him going after the rude woman. No, it's not. She should be thanking you, not treating you like a freak. I'm used to it, Asia replied sadly, a dejected look on her face as Ben looked back at her. Did you understand what she was saying? She shook her head slightly. Not her words, but those eyes, I've seen them before. It seems things aren't so different from before, even in this town, she thought with a sad sigh. Thank you, lady. The two of them looked across the clearing to see the boy, still being dragged away by his mother, waving back at them with a smile on his face. There you go. It's not all bad, Ben smiled as he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Asia couldn't help but smile broadly at this and waved back at the retreating boy. Hee hee. I guess you're right. Of course I am, now let's get going and find your church. I think I know the way there. Okay. Let's go. Asia smiled happily as she walked beside him as they set off. A few minutes of silence passed before Ben asked his question. So, what was that back there? That power? Oh, that? It's a healing power. How did you get it? I've had it since BRTH. Her expression then turned distant and forlorn. I am truly lucky to have been given such a wonderful gift from God, she added, a detectable hint of sadness in her voice. It certainly is a unique gift, he mused as he recalled the feeling he felt when Asia used the power on the injured boy. Does she have a sacred gear too? It certainly felt like one. They continued on their journey for a few more streets before they came into sight of their destination. There it is. Asia exclaimed excitedly. That's where you're working. Ben wondered with confusion as he looked up the hill at the church resting on top of it. It looks like nobody's been in there for years. He was suddenly caught short by the chill that ran up his spine as he looked up at the damaged building. SHT. Am I too close? Is it because it's a church and I'm a devil? They did say it needed a bit of work done, but it's still a house of God. I don't mind where I go, I'll do whatever it takes to help those in need. How can such an innocent soul exist? Ben wondered, perplexed. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? No. Ben replied, perhaps too quickly, as he placed Asia's suitcase on the ground beside him. He immediately felt really bad at the dejected look on Asia's face at his rejection. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that, he quickly added apologetically. It's just that there's somewhere else I have to be and I don't want to be late. Oh, okay. I understand. Thank you for showing me the way. It was my pleasure, Asia. I hope we can meet again sometime, Ben called out as he backed away from the church and waved goodbye to Asia. Yes. I would like that very much. Until next time. Asia shouted back with reddened cheeks and a wide smile as she waved goodbye. As he turned the corner, Ben glanced down at his watch and blanched when he saw how late he was. He was at the completely wrong side of Kuo from where he needed to be. SHT, he exclaimed as he took off at a sprint. Rias is going to kill me. What were you thinking? Rias exclaimed in exasperation from her chair while Ben, standing before her on the other side of the large desk, held a sheepish look on his face at her chastisement. He had been correct in his thinking that Rias would be angry when she found out where he had been. He hadn't planned to tell her if he could help it, but when he turned up at the clubroom an hour late to see everybody gathered and waiting for him, she had not only chastised him for being late, something she didn't approve of, but she became very insistent that he explain himself as to what kept him. He initially gave a very basic version of events, leaving out his encounter with Asia and escorting her to the church, but Rias instantly saw through his poor attempt to hide the truth and called him out on it. Disgruntled about being found out, Ben then told her the true story. When he spoke about his encounter with the blonde-haired nun, she shook her head slightly with a sigh, but that paled in comparison to when he got to the part about the church where she stood up abruptly and slammed her hands down on her desk. I wasn't, Ben admitted with a slight shake of his head. Have you forgotten that churches are considered enemy territory? Did you not get a bad feeling when you went near it? Actually, I did feel something when I looked at it. That was your devil instincts warning you to stay away. Even if it's a near-crumbling ruin, it is still a church and, thus, a place we devils aren't allowed to go near without it causing major problems. Ben looked down at her stern words. Simply being in the proximity of someone affiliated with the church is risky. Some exorcists who are affiliated with the church even possess sacred gears which make them a big threat. As God ensured that only humans could inherit sacred gears when He created them, He made it possible for the church to compete against devils and fallen angels on a more level playing field. I get it. I'm sorry. Rias looked at his dejected expression and sighed, pushing herself up and leaning closer to Ben, an encouraging look on her face. Ben, I don't say these things to be harsh or scare you, okay? Ben looked up at her. I say these things because I want you to understand how dangerous it is being near the church and those affiliated with it. If a devil is killed by a light weapon or a sacred gear, then that's it. There's no coming back from that. You will truly be dead, and for a devil, that means we simply cease to be. Even though he didn't make himself known, Ben felt Azimuth agree with Rias' warning about the dangers he now had to watch out for. I understand. I'm glad you do. I'm sorry if I sounded too harsh on you just then. I've got a lot on my plate right now and I think I took some of that frustration out on you just now. No, you were just telling me as it is. I won't go near that place again. Thank you. Now, let's move on from this and get back to work, huh? Sure, Ben nodded as he took a seat as the conversation turned back to work. Later. Boy, I really put my foot in it this time, didn't I? Ben muttered to himself as he leaned back against the couch, taking a break from the paperwork before him. He was currently all alone in the clubroom. Kiba and Kaneko had responded to summons from some of their regular clients and had headed home straight afterwards. Rias, on the other hand, had stepped out of the clubroom for a moment as she needed to contact somebody about something, and Akino had gone with her to assist her with whatever she needed. The red-haired female makes a good point, kid, Azimuth's voice spoke out within his mind, startling Ben by his sudden reappearance. You're back, Ben responded, leaning forward quickly. How come? Because you're getting a little stronger every day. Anyway, back to my original point, she is right to point out the dangers you face now you're a devil. I'd hate for my vessel to be reduced to nothing so soon after meeting him. That's what you're worried about? No, not the only thing. Sure, I bet you're thrilled to be stuck in the body of some nobody like me, Ben mused sarcastically. Actually, I'm looking forward to our future partnership, kid. It's Ben. Whatever. As I was saying, I think it'll be interesting working with you. How come? Before I was sealed inside my sacred gear, I was one of the 3 dragon gods, the dragon god of life. You cannot even comprehend the boredom I experienced for eons. Unlike those 2 who were content with their stagnation, I considered it a torturous existence and did everything in my enormous power to fight against my tedious existence and feel something, to feel alive. Ben just nodded as he listened to Asmatha's story. He had to admit the dragon had a point, while he tried to imagine what it must be like being a creature of such enormous power with nothing to do to pass the millions of years he must have lived for. Is that why you created dragons? He found himself asking. Indeed. I created dragons to represent power, grace, selfish, and most of all, free. Unlike the other races, I created them to be power unto themselves, to not be subject to any authority unless they wish it, and to do what I never could, live their lives how they wished. How did that turn out? Very successfully from what I saw before being sealed. Dragons were admired, respected, and feared by all, even gods. What about God? God. At first, he admired my work as a fellow creator himself, but after what happened to his precious first humans, he developed a great hatred for all dragonkind and it became a forbidden topic for us to talk about. What happened? Ben asked curiously. A story for another time perhaps. You have a long way to go before you're ready to hear about such things. Your priority for now is to learn how to control my gear. I will assist you where I can. I guess you're right. Fine, what can you tell me about your gear? What is it called and what does it do exactly? God and I never came to an agreement as to what it should be called when we built it. It had numerous names as we worked on it including Omnitrix and the Arc. I, however, always preferred to call it simply the transformation gear. As for what it does, I would have thought you'd figured it out when you experienced its capability last night. The gear allows its wielder to transform into any of the countless beings and creatures that has a DNA sample stored in its limitless library. Wow. That sounds so cool. Ben cast a quick glance down at his right arm. What about my other sacred gear? As the red-haired female said. Rias. What? The red-haired female? Her name is Rias Gremory, just so you know. Anyway, as Rias told you, your other gear is known as the boosted gear, one of the 13 Longinus created by God, and the gear in which resides the red dragon emperor, Drake, one of the 2 heavenly dragons. Another dragon? Wait, if you created dragons, does that make Drake your son? The 2 heavenly dragons are different from other dragons. While it is true that I used my DNA as a template for every dragon, I made it so the only thing I have with them is that we are of the same race. That is where the similarities end. Drake and Albion were the exception, an experiment of mine when I first began work on creating dragons. Unlike the others, those 2 do share genetics with me personally. So they are related to you. Asmath growled a little at the interruption but continued regardless. Yes, suppose that does make them my offspring. He fell silent as he realized what he said. In all the time I've existed, I've never actually looked at it that way before. It would explain a lot of things, though. How so? Well, it would explain why they acted like they did before they had to be sealed away in their gears. Yes, how did I not see it before? They acted so much like myself when I was a younger. Asmath stopped his trail of thought for a moment as he returned his attention back to Ben. You've given me something to think about, kid. Ben gave his name again but Asmath completely ignored him. I'll have to reflect on it a bit. It's made me see things in a different light. I'll speak with you later. I believe you are about to be joined by your comrades. With that, the ancient dragon fell silent at the exact same time the doors to the clubroom opened as Rias and Aquino entered the room. Ah good, you're still here, Rias observed as she spotted him. Hey, what's going on? We've just received word from the Archduke, Aquino explained for him. Ben wanted to ask what an Archduke was but he felt that now wasn't the time for it so let Aquino continue. There is a stray devil loose nearby and we've been tasked with taking care of it. What's a stray devil? I'll explain when we get there. Come on, Kiba and Kaneko have already been informed and will meet us there, Rias stated from the clear space in the clubroom as she created a medium-sized magic circle with the Gremory crest etched into it. I'm coming, Ben announced as he hurried over to join the two buxom beauties. Once he stood with them, Rias activated the circle and the three of them disappeared in a brief flash of red light. Abandoned warehouse, Kuo outskirts. So, what's a stray devil then? Ben asked again as he looked up at the dark, daunting building before him. The three of them had appeared at their destination to find Kiba and Kaneko already there and waiting for them. Kiba was standing beside him and answered his question. They start out as regular reincarnated devil servants, and every once in a while, a servant decides to rebel and kills their MSTR to try and gain their freedom or for other selfish desires. This causes its own problems, though, as their power may go beyond their control and it consumes them, causing them to lose their minds in worst-case scenarios. According to the reports concerning this particular stray, she has been luring people from the surrounding area to this spot before devouring them, Aquino relayed from Ben's right where she stood next to Rias. And we have to stop something like that? Rias looked up at the dark building, her hands on her hips. As it escaped into my territory, it's our duty to deal with it before it kills any more people. It should be an easy job. Find the beast and kill it, Aquino stated simply. Let's go, Rias commanded as she led the way into the building, Ben and the others following closely behind her. As they made their way through the building, it appeared completely deserted. Their footsteps gently echoed around them as they made their way down each corridor as they searched for their target. When they reached what looked like it used to be the admin offices of the warehouse, Rias instructed Kiba, Kaneko and Aquino to spread out and inspect the offices around them. Ben offered to join them in searching but Rias held him back. No, I want you to stay back for this mission. Why? Because I won't be useful in a fight? Ben asked in response without resentment or bitterness in his voice. He knew full well that he would more of a hindrance than a help in a fight. It's true that you don't have any combat experience, but that's not why I want you to hang back for this. Why then? Before Rias could answer him, Kiba returned from his search with a grim expression on his face. Rias, you'll want to see this, he told her with nauseous look on his face. Not asking any questions, Rias immediately headed over to him as did the others, following after him as he guided them back to his discovery. When Ben looked into the large conference room Kiba indicated, his eyes widened in shock and horror as he was greeted by the grotesque sight before him. Bodies. Dozens of mutilated, half-eaten bodies and several more well into the steps of decomposition littered the room. The floor no longer observable under the thick layer of dried blood and half-eaten flesh that completely covered it. As he looked at the grisly scene before him, Ben was suddenly struck by the overwhelmingly powerful stench of rot and decomposition, and it became too much for him. He quickly backed away from the room and ran over to the other side of the corridor where he regurgitated the contents of his stomach. Are you okay, sweetie? Aquino asked kindly as she came over to him and gently rubbed his back in a comforting manner. I'm fine, thanks, just wasn't expecting to cough. See that, Ben replied as he breathed deeply to regain his senses. I've just never seen anything like that before. It's not something you get used to, Kiba noted grimly. How come I couldn't smell anything until I looked in there? Aren't I supposed to have better senses now I'm a devil? You are. But a small barrier has been placed around this room that masks the smell from attracting attention, Rias told him gently before looking back into the room with disgust on her face. This is why we take things like this so seriously. Strays care about nothing else except satisfying their own desires. Let's keep looking for it. Ben joined the others in agreeing with Rias and, after he wiped off the last bit of saliva from his chin, followed them as they continued their search of the warehouse. It wasn't long after finding the room of bodies that they came to the entrance to the large, spacious storage area which made up half the warehouse's space. It's in there, Kaneko announced firmly as she led the way into the spacious area. Good. Are you familiar with chess by any chance? Ben?" Rias asked as he walked up beside her and stopped on her left-hand side. "Huh?" Ben replied, thrown off by the sudden question. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I've played a few games before." "That's good to hear. It'll make things easier to explain. Each member of a devil's peerage takes on the role and characteristics of the chess piece that was used to make them part of their MSTRs, the king's peerage. I want you to stand back with me and observe the fight so you can learn how we fight as a team and how you fit into it for the future." Sure," Ben nodded in understanding and stayed beside Rias as they headed towards the center of the large space. "Who duress disturbs us?" a slimy, venom-filled voice echoed around them and bringing their group to a sudden stop. Their gaze fell on a large pillar on the other side of the room where movement could be seen. From what Ben could make out, one thing was clear to him: whatever they were dealing with was very large. His prediction was answered when the figure emerged from behind its hiding spot and slid out into the open to reveal its true, grotesque form. Ben didn't exactly know what to call it other than repulsive. What he was looking at was a creature whose head and entire upper half was that of a naked woman with a voluptuous figure which also had large fangs instead of teeth. Or rather its, hair was wild and falling out in places, leaving large bald patches. However, it was the lower half that repulsed him the most as it looked like it was composed of multiple creatures fused together. It had 4 legs, each equipped with sharp claws, a pair of gigantic muscular arms which also had claws, and a long hissing snake for a tail that glared at them menacingly. At first glance it looked to Ben like some perverted, monstrous recreation of a centaur. "Visser. You disgusting failure of a devil. You have been sentenced to death for the heinous crimes of killing your MSTR in cold blood and for fleeing judgment to fulfill your own lustful wants and desires and allowing yourself to be consumed by them. This is the end for you. Come and try it, beach." Visser retorted with a hiss as she fondled her large melons roughly. Unable to look away from her vulgar display, Ben's eyes widened when he saw the magic circles around her tips which had stretched and morphed into the shape of gun nozzles 2 inches long which she aimed at them as she laughed manically and had a mad look of glee in her eyes. "No way." Ben gaped as he realized what was about to happen. His suspicion was proven right when Visser suddenly fired an ominous-looking yellow liquid from them, aimed directly at their group. Everyone reacted at the sudden attack and dodged out of the way of the projectiles as they struck where they had just been standing. Ben looked back to see that, where the yellow ooze had struck the floor and pillar was being steadily eaten away from the acidic ooze. "So, the crazy monster beach can shoot acid from her tips? That makes sense," he sighed incredulously. "It might look intimidating, kid, but you could easily take that abomination on by yourself even at your current level," Asmuth noted though Ben doubted him from what he was looking at. "Kiba," Rias ordered as she recovered from the acid attack. Kiba nodded and unsheathed his sword before disappearing from view. "Where'd Kiba go?" Ben asked, unable to see the blonde-haired devil. "Kiba possesses one of my knight pieces and thus gains the trait of enhanced speed that enables him to strike my enemies down before they know what hit them," Rias explained for him as Kiba reappeared above Visser, his blade fully drawn, and struck at it several times in the space of a single second. Visser howled in pain as her forearms were severed just below the shoulder and watched helplessly as they fell to the floor with a loud clatter. She screeched manically as her large chest cavity suddenly opened outwards to reveal a massive set of sharp, jagged teeth. Its mad gaze looked around for a target and it found it in Kaneko who had stepped up to it with an emotionless expression. Screeching madly, Visser lunged forward, towards Kaneko, her chest cavity opening wide before clamping down on her when she was right on top of her. "Watch out, Kaneko!" Ben cried out, dumbfounded as to why Kaneko made no move to avoid the attack or defend herself as she disappeared from view in Visser's massive jaw. "Don't worry, she's fine," Rias told him calmly. "As my rook, Kaneko possesses great strength and durability. That attack would hardly even scratch her, let alone cause any real damage." Even as Rias finished explaining, Visser screeched defiantly as its jaws were slowly forced open by Kaneko. Once she'd opened the jaws wide enough, Kaneko reared her fist back before delivering a powerful punch to the huge jaw she had just been engulfed by, smashing the teeth to smithereens while also sending Visser backwards from the blow and crashing into a pillar which broke from the impact and fell on top of her. "Akino, if you would," Rias said to the raven-haired beauty who was already moving into action. "It would be my pleasure," Akino chuckled happily as she took to the air with her devil wings. While everyone's attention was directed towards the fight, Ben felt something wrong behind him. He turned around to see the arms that Kiba had severed were writhing on the floor as they appeared to gain some sort of sentience as they lunged themselves through the air at the person standing closest to them, Rias. "Look out," he cried, his body already moving on instinct, diving forward and sweeping Rias off her feet as he picked her up bridal style and leapt out of the way as the arms struck the spot where she had just been standing. As the arms picked themselves up to strike again, Kiba reappeared out of nowhere and sliced up the arms with his blade until there was nothing left. Once he had dealt with them, he looked over at his leader and newest comrade to see Ben, caught in his own momentum, had managed to angle himself so that he fell backwards against an intact pillar and slid down it. He still held Rias in his arms as she found herself sat in his lap as he took deep breaths to recover from the wind that was knocked out of him. "Thank you, Ben. That was very sweet," she told him sweetly, patting him gently on the cheek as she detached from his hold and picked herself up off the floor and returned her attention back to the stray who was picking herself up off the ground. "Sure, no problem," Ben replied as he stroked the back of his head which he had bruised when hitting the pillar. "Akino, finish her off," Rias called out across the room. "Oh goody. It's been a while since I found someone else who likes it rough. Let's have some fun." Akino gasped excitedly. "Is Akino your queen then?" Ben deduced as he returned to his feet and rejoined Rias' side. "You are correct. As my queen, Akino possesses a perfect combination of the other two pieces, making her almost unbeatable. You've been a very naughty devil, and now I get to punish you." Akino cried with an ecstatic smile plastered across her face as she licked her lips seductively. She also happened to be really into S&M, Rias added as they looked at the look of unbridled delight on her face as she blasted Visser with bolts of electricity. "This is getting me so hot," Akino exclaimed lustfully, as if to prove Rias' point. "She gets off on things like this?" Ben thought incredulously as he looked at Akino and compared her to the polite, friendly girl he thought he understood. "When I resigned myself to being sealed with my gear, I never imagined in a billion years that I'd find myself ending up with such a unique group of individuals," Asmuth mused to himself in Ben's head. Rias stepped away from Ben and made her way over to Akino. "I think she's had enough, Akino." "Ah, already?" she grumbled with disappointment in her voice as she stopped the barrage of electricity she was firing at the prone stray. "In the name of the House of Gremory, I now grant you death," Rias declared coldly as she held her left hand out, palm out towards the greatly injured Visser. A Gremory magic circle formed before her hand as a dark aura engulfed her before she fired a bolt of crimson energy at Visser which exploded violently when it found its target. When the smoke finally dispersed enough to see where Visser had been, they could only see a large crater in her stead. "Wow! Rias is so powerful." Ben couldn't help but mutter in amazement as he stared at the damage she had inflicted in a single attack. "She sure is," Kiba agreed with a smile. "There's a very good reason she's known as the Princess of Destruction." "Game over," Rias muttered to herself before turning away from the crater and returning back to her peerage. "Let's leave this place." "Hang on a second." Rias glanced over at Ben. "What piece am I? You said you had trouble reviving me, so what piece did you use for me?" Rias smiled and turned to face Ben fully. "To revive you I needed to use every single one of my pawn pieces, and even then it wasn't enough. If I hadn't been given an extremely rare piece to assist me, you would have been unable to return." Ben blinked several times as he processed what he just heard. "I'm unfamiliar with the terminology being used." You'll have to explain this chess to me sometime, Asmith mused, but Ben completely ignored him and kept his attention focused on Rias. You used all your pawn pieces on me. Wasn't that a big risk? You could have had 8 people in total instead of just me. Rias smiled fondly at him and placed a hand on his cheek. You're so sweet to be concerned about that. It's true that it was a big risk using all my pawn pieces, but I believe beyond all doubt that I made the right choice. They continued to make their way out of the warehouse and stopped when they reached the road. By the way, Ben, due to the sudden mission to deal with the stray, I nearly forgot to tell you something, Rias announced, suddenly remembering something. Yeah. What was it? We received a low-priority summons from a prospective client. I think this would be a good opportunity to get some more experience and another client. Do you think you can handle it? Sure, I can handle it. Where is it? It's not far from here, actually. Do you want to walk there or would you prefer to be transported there? Ben thought about it for a moment before he gave his answer. I think I'll actually walk there this time. It might be a bit strange for a devil to turn up somewhere like that, but I could do with some fresh air really. I can still smell and taste that room of bodies. He shivered a little as the room appeared in his head. Hopefully, a walk will help get rid of it completely. Very well. We'll see you later when you report back once it's done, Rias nodded as she passed him. The address of the client and gave him directions to follow. Good luck with the client. Hopefully, it won't be as traumatic as your last one. Aquino chirped with a light laugh while Ben groaned at the memory. Ugh, you're never going to let me forget that, are you? Never. Ben shook his head and headed off in the direction Rias had indicated was the way to the client before Aquino could tease him again. See you later, he called back to them with a wave of his hand, which Kiba and Aquino returned and lost sight of them when he turned down a side street. Once he was out of sight, Aquino created a teleportation circle around herself and the others before they, too, disappeared. Ah, here we go, this looks like the place, Ben muttered as he looked down at the address he had been given and the address he was standing outside and saw that they matched. He looked up at the unassuming building and couldn't help but notice that there was no light coming from the windows. CRP. Was I too late? Have they changed their mind and gone to bed? Ben cursed under his breath. There's only one way to find out. I can sense the life force of somebody though, so they're still in the building. You can sense people's life force. Yes, Asmith replied simply, not saying anything else. Ben sighed and quickly ascended the front steps of the client's house and, once he cast a quick glance around to see if there was anybody around, rang the doorbell once he found the coast was clear. Hello, this is the Dial-a-Devil service answering your summons. One devil delivered right to your own home, he announced himself loud enough for the client inside to hear. When he got no response, Ben switched to knocking on the door to get their attention, stopping immediately and quickly retracting his hand when the door slowly swung inwards to reveal a long dark hallway, the only source of light coming from behind a closed door at the end of the corridor. Curiosity getting the better of him, yet again, Ben stepped into the house. As soon as he was fully across the house threshold, he gasped at the sudden weird feeling that washed over him. What was that? He wondered internally as he closed the door behind him, regretting his decision to do so when another, stronger wave of unfamiliar energy washed over him. Collecting himself together, Ben slowly made his way deeper into the house. Thanks to his devil vision, he had no difficulty at all in seeing through the darkness as he slowly made his way closer and closer to the thin line of light that highlighted the door, blocking his view to the room beyond it. Hello? Is anyone there? Your door was open, so I came in. He took a few more careful steps towards the highlighted door. He got no response. If you're hoping to try and scare a devil, you're out of luck. I've got perfect night vision, so it won't work. Still no response. Even though he might be a devil, Ben had never been a fan of horror films, unlike his mother and sister who had weird ideas of how to enjoy films. He'd always been like his dad and preferred comedies or action films. Despite not watching them when he could help it though, he couldn't ignore the irony of how the situation he was in currently had all the hallmarks of such a film. He could even hear the mouthy group of friends in the cinema for this film and screaming at him, much to everyone else's annoyance, to get the F out of their boy. If I realize it though, why the hell haven't I left already? Before he even noticed, he'd made it down the entire length of the corridor and now stood at the door hiding the source of light behind it. Gently pushing open the door, Ben slowly entered the dimly lit room to find he had found what was clearly the house's living room. "Hello, is anybody here?" Ben began to say before finding himself almost slipping up on something beneath his feet. Quickly supporting himself on the door frame, he looked down to see a dark liquid covering the floor. "Oh great," he grumbled as he looked down at the liquid beneath him. He noticed that, whatever the liquid was, it covered a great deal of the wooden floor. "Is this what I was summoned for? To clean up a spill?" He sighed heavily. I guess it's nowhere near as bad as Milton." He crouched down to examine the liquid. If he was going to be asked to clean it up, he wanted to know what it was. Reaching down with his left hand, he wiped his fingers through a small patch of liquid and brought it back to his face to examine. As he brought it close to his face though, his nose picked up the scent and he instantly identified the smell as something he smelt not even a few minutes ago. "BLD. The F?" Ben cursed, quickly standing back up and taking a step back from the pool of BLD he had been standing in. His eyes followed the pool of BLD towards its source on the other side of the dimly lit room, quickly finding it in the shape of what used to be a man that had been decapitated and had been nailed upside down against the wall in the shape of an upside-down cross. The body had been gutted thoroughly and there was little left that hadn't been cut or slashed in some way. "I think that used to be your client," Asmuth noted grimly. If he hadn't just seen an entire room full of similarly mutilated bodies less than an hour ago, Ben would have been struggling to keep hold of the contents of his stomach. Now, though, all he felt was horror at the kind of person who could such a thing to another human being. Punish the wicked and smite the followers of evil. Ben spun around to the center of the room to see a robed man with short white hair reclining on a bloody couch and looking at a decapitated head that had to have been the client, which was positioned on the low table just in front of the candles that had been the source of the room's light. The man arched his head back to look at Ben. "Wise words to live by. Don't you agree?" he asked with a manic look in his red eyes and his tongue hanging out of his mouth. Ben didn't answer him. Instead, he stepped away from the man, his eyes locked on the man as he slowly rose up out of his bloody seat. He looked to be in his early 20s. He wore clerical robes that Ben recognized as ones belonging to an affiliate of the church. "SHT, I'm in trouble," he whispered uneasily. "Looks like you finally decided to join the party, devil boy," the man declared with an extremely manic look in his eyes and a sadistic smile on his face which sent a chill down Ben's spine as he looked at him. It was here that Ben noted the pistol the man had secured on his right hip and the sword handle secured on his left. "You did this?" Ben gestured to the mutilated body. "Why did you kill him?" "Why? Because he's F scum. Anybody who willingly summons a devil has proven that they have made the decision to stop being human and, as such, have no need to remain alive." He let out another psychotic laugh that sounded wrong to Ben's ears. "Why cut him up though?" "That's just barbaric," he retorted in a bid to buy time so he could come up with a plan to escape. "That's rich coming from a devil. As for why I had some fun with him, that's your fault really. After I killed him for attempting to make deals with a devil, I still had to wait an hour until you finally turned up. I was insanely bored simply waiting around for you to appear and needed to do something to pass the time. My first thought was to have some fun with my temporary assistant. Cutting people while they're alive feels so much better than gutting a corpse, don't you agree?" Ben only glared at the man in disgust. "No. Just me then. Oh well. Anyway, it was then I remembered I wasn't allowed to cause any permanent harm to her, so that plan went soaring out the window and I had to resort to using Mr. Scumbag here. He reached over the couch and picked up the head by the hair and throwing it over to Ben. Instead of catching it, he knocked it away where it hit the floor and rolled away to a dark corner where it was forgotten about. "You're sick. Coming from you, I'll consider that a great compliment," he cackled before bowing his body slightly. "Allow me to introduce myself. Fried Selzen, at your service. You have the honor of me being the exorcist that'll be performing your devil purge this evening, all thanks to the little devil purging organization that has graciously decided to sponsor me for the time being. SHT." Ben recalled the stark warning he received from Rias concerning the dangers of exorcists and how they possessed weapons of light that could destroy him completely. As Fried ended his hollow bow, Ben saw he had unsheathed his sword handle, now activated to reveal that it was a blade composed of light, and now held his pistol in his hand. He took a step towards Ben, his eyes turning manic again, like a predator eyeing its prey. "Ooh, I'm so going to enjoy you up. But how should I do it? Ooh, I know. First I'll cut out your filthy devil heart while it's still beating and then I'll chop off your limbs, leaving you attached, of course. Once I've left you as a lump of bleeding meat with only your head left, I'll find you the courtesy of ending your miserable existence by putting a blessed bullet between your evil eyes. How does that sound, devil boy?" he cackled as he suddenly lunged forward, his sword raised up and aimed right at Ben's chest. Ben reacted with milliseconds to spare, leaping backwards and dodging the sword move while, at the same time, activating his sacred gears as he landed several feet backwards from the exorcist. "Ooh, looky here. Looks like our little devil here has a few toys to play with. Hopefully, you'll put up a decent fight with them." You want me to fight back?" Ben asked, confused. "Of course. I haven't had any fun in ages and it'll make me feel so good when I cut out your demon heart and see how it tastes." Fried lunged forward again, this time firing his pistol at the same time. Ben managed to dodge the blade again but he wasn't able to completely avoid the blessed bullet as it penetrated his left arm just below the shoulder blade. "Gah!" Ben gasped in pain as he clutched his injured arm, his teeth gritted at the incredibly intense pain shooting through his body. SHT. I hate holy weapons. F this. There's no way I'm going to take this lying down anymore. It's time I finally tried out my powers, he declared as he pressed the side of the dial on his gauntlet, twisted it through a CYCL of holographic images, not knowing what any of them could do to help him, but quickly settled on one that looked like it could help. "Hold on, kid." "That one," Azimuth cried out in warning, but it was too late. Ben had already slammed his hand down on the dial, gasping at the pain in his arm as he vanished in a flash of light. "What the F?" Fried cursed as he was forced to avert his eyes. "Transform, Pisxis Valn." As the flash of light died down, it revealed a strange creature standing in Ben's place. He now had the strange appearance of a humanoid fish-like creature that stood upright on a pair of scaled legs. He was light gray in color and his body was mostly covered in scales with four-fingered hands that were webbed. His face shared a number of physical characteristics with an anglerfish in that he had a glowing lure protruding out of the top of its head and a set of several rows of razor-sharp teeth. The circular dial rested over his muscular left pectoral. "What's the hell is this form?" Ben wondered, his voice now deep and raspy, as he looked down at his new form. "I was trying to warn you, kid. There are some forms in my gear that aren't suited for every situation, so you need to be careful when you choose. You've picked probably one of the forms least suited to help you right now. Why, what's wrong with it?" Before Azimuth could answer him, Fried had recovered from the flash of light and had instantly gone back onto the offensive. "Ooh, I've never seen a devil do that before. Doesn't matter though, I'll still run you through, no matter what hell spawn you turn into," Fried exclaimed as he fired his pistol again as he charged towards Ben. Ben was surprised at how easily he was able to avoid Fried's bullet and knock the blade aside the sword handle, making sure to avoid the light part of it, before delivering a powerful backhand blow that caught the manic exorcist squarely in the chest and launched him through the air and hitting the far wall with such speed that he went straight through it and disappearing from view. Wow, this form is so powerful. I feel like I can, Ben tried to say but found it getting harder and harder to talk each time he tried. His breathing was quickly getting deeper and harder to do without effort. What's happening to me? He gasped as he fell to one knee, overcome by the sudden bout of breathlessness. You're unable to breathe like before. You're a Pisxisvalm, an aquatic fish demon that lives underwater. They're not meant to be out of water for too long. He gasped as he clutched his throat near where his gills were as he felt them slowly drying out from the lack of moisture. Fried forced his way out of the wall he had been thrown through, the manic look still in his eye as he laughed even more sadistic than before. This is so much fun, he cackled manically as he threw himself back into the fight again. Ben tried to push himself back onto his feet but wasn't able to do it fast enough, nor was he able to react to the several pistol bullets that Fried had fired at him. As a result, he was shot 3 times by holy bullets, once in the side, once in his shin, and the last one which grazed over his right collarbone. Arg! Ben cried out in pain as he clutched his side and leg. Ah, don't tell me it's over already. We've only just started, Fried whined as he stood over Ben's downed form. Oh, well, guess it was too good to last, he sighed as he aimed his pistol at the back of Ben's scaly head. As he heard the pistol hammer being cocked back, and even though he was in incredible pain, Ben still managed to surprise the insane exorcist, moving his head out of the way as he fired into the floor. Ben then arced around and threw himself at Fried, using one hand to clamp down on the wrist that held the light sword and squeezed tightly. Fried cried out painfully as he was forced to release his hold on his sword. I need to finish him quickly, Ben realized as he started to feel very lightheaded and his vision started to get blurry from lack of hydration. He grabbed Fried by the collar and slammed him against the nearest wall and, while he still held on to the exorcist by the collar, Ben threw him over his shoulder and crashing down onto the table which broke apart from the impact. Through his rapidly deteriorating vision, Ben could make out the damage he was managing to inflict on Fried by the number of bruises and BLD that covered the exorcist's body. Picking him up, Ben slammed him against the wall again with the intention of using the last of his strength to either knock Fried out or kill him. He didn't care which one happened as long as it ended the fight. This ends now. Rearing his scaled fist back, Ben was about to deliver his blow when Arfk! Ben's head snapped to the left toward the origin of the high-pitched, feminine scream and, through his blurry vision, saw a short, blonde-haired person standing a few feet away from him. Bang! Ben grunted in pain as the bullet passed right through his stomach. Bang! Bang! The 2 subsequent bullets found their marks around the same spot as the first. Ben released his hold on Fried's collar as the last of his strength left him and he fell backwards onto the floor. As he looked up at the ceiling, his vision started to darken in the corner of his eyes as it became virtually impossible for him to breathe at all at this point. Is this it? Is this how I die, again? Just as he thought this was the end, he was engulfed in another flash of light, this time it was red, and when it disappeared it revealed Ben back in his normal form. As his transformation was finally over, Ben took a massive gulp of air, ignoring for the moment how painful it was to actually do that simple action as he concentrated on filling his lungs with air. Each breath he took felt like fire but it did the trick, each breath he took in made his vision a little better. What was that? He asked as his vision slowly returned to normal. A safety feature of my gear. When you are too injured or unable to sustain the form any longer, it forcibly cancels the transformation for you and returns you back to your normal form. Unfortunately, it also carries over whatever injuries you sustained in that form. I feared as much, Ben grunted as his near suffocation was, instead, replaced by a wave of fire that quickly spread through his whole body from the injuries he received from Fried's pistol. He pushed himself back and propped himself up on the back of the couch as he looked down at his injuries. Ben. Is that you? Ben looked up at the one who spoke, his eyes widening in shock at the voice's owner. Asia? What are you doing here? Asia had her hand covering her mouth as she looked down at him. She had seen his transformation. She saw him as that demon as he fought Fried. She then spotted the mutilated corpse of the house's former owner and she screeched again at the horrific sight before her. Asia? What the F are you doing? Have you finished creating the barrier or not? Fried demanded as he picked up his discarded light sword. The last thing we need are any more F-devils getting in my way. What have you done? She asked fearfully as she held on to her cross and muttered a silent prayer of protection. Ah, that's right. I forgot that you're a newbie. Listen well, kid, this is what the job is. Fried gestured to the corpse hanging on the wall. Dealing with human scum who commune with devils. He then walked over to Ben and pressed his boot down HRD on the bullet wound in Ben's shin, grinning with insane glee at the pained groan that escaped Ben's mouth. And disposing of the evil devils who bewitch poor, innocent souls. Asia looked back at Ben with wide, fearful eyes. No, it can't be. Sorry you had to see me like this, Ben coughed, a trickle of blood trickling down his cheek as every part of him felt like it was on fire. Hang on, do you two know each other? Fried asked, looking between the two of them with confusion plastered on his manic face. Without responding to him, Asia rushed over to Ben with a determined look on her face, knelt down beside him and started healing him with her magic. What the F do you think you're doing, Asia? Fried demanded, the sadistic smirk disappearing from his face. Even if he's really a devil, he showed me kindness when I first came to this town. It's only right that I return that kindness. Asia, don't do it, Ben grunted as he tried to push her hands away, even as he felt his wounds slowly start to heal up. He may die from his wounds but he couldn't let Asia help him, a devil, with an insane person like Fried in the room. He dreaded to think what he would do to her if she helped him. As if manifesting Ben's worst fears, Fried strode over to them quickly and delivered a brutal backhand slap to Asia who cried out in pain as she fell backwards from the unexpected blow. That's not what we do with disgusting devils, Beach. He activated his blade again, flipped it in his hand and stabbed it down into Ben's left thigh, impaling him into the floor before delivering another kick to Ben's side. Gah! Ben howled, both at the excruciating pain he felt in his leg from the light sword embedded in it, and the pain he felt when Fried kicked his ribs, definitely breaking a few ribs in the process. That is what we do with them, and that is only the start. He looked down at Ben with pure disgust and fury on his face. I was planning to simply end you quickly, but now I think I'll have some fun with you, but... He spat at Ben. Now, I'm going to take my time with you and make you suffer for your sins you shitty, devil, he snarled, punctuating each syllable at the end with a brutal punch to the face. No. Please don't hurt him. Asia cried, putting herself between Fried and Ben and facing the insane man with her arms out to protect Ben. I beg you. Have mercy. He's my friend. Friend? Fried's hateful glare was suddenly directed towards Asia. His hand shot forward and grabbed Asia's cheeks painfully and pulled her close to his face. Are you out of your mind? We came here tonight to kill a filthy devil and that's exactly what I plan to do and nobody is getting in my way. He reared his free hand back before bringing it forward with as much power as he could behind it and delivered an incredibly sharp slap. Across Asia's right cheek. Asia screamed at the shocking blow which knocked her away a few steps from the power behind it and clutched her cheek which had turned bright red. Ben tried to look up at Asia but his face was in such a state that blood and swelling now obscured his vision and restricted what he could see. Now stay out of my way. Fried snarled dangerously as he turned back to Ben and pulled his blade out of Ben's leg, making sure to twist it painfully as it left his bleeding leg. Still clutching her injured cheek, Asia returned to her spot between Fried and Ben where she stood shakily with a look of terrified defiance in her green eyes. No. I won't. This is wrong. There is goodness in him, I know it. Enough of this SHT. Fried exclaimed as he brought his blade above his head and slashed it down in front of Asia, slicing clean through her nun's habit and BR, exposing her bare chest to the room. No. Asia cried as she covered her chest in embarrassment at her sudden state of undress. To hell with it. Fried declared as he grabbed Asia's wrists with his free hand and dragged her away from Ben before holding them above her head, revealing her bare melons again, and before thrusting his blade through the sleeves of her torn habit and into the wall behind her, holding her in place. I was told by the fallen angels that I couldn't kill you, but that doesn't mean I can't have some fun with a nun slut like you, does it? Fallen angels. They're involved again. Fried grabbed one of Asia's bare melons roughly and ran his other hand underneath her habit and along her leg up towards her panties. No. Please don't. Asia cried tearfully as she tried to wriggle out of Fried's control to no avail. I don't know if they want you unspoiled, but right now, I don't give a DMN. What they don't know won't hurt them after all. It'll be our little secret, okay? He licked her injured cheek as he continued to manhandle and molest her. I'm going to enjoy plucking your delicate flower. No. Fried growled at being interrupted again and glanced back to see Ben standing on his feet again. He was shaking fiercely and using every last ounce of strength he had left just to remain on his feet and keep his eyes open through the unbearable pain he felt throughout his whole body. Leave her alone, he wheezed, BLD continuing to trickle down his cheeks, as he leaned heavily against the couch he had been propped up against seconds before as he glared at Fried through his battered and bleeding face. This isn't cheap internet porn, kid. If you wanna watch, it's gonna cost you. Fried chuckled, finally letting go of Asia as he drew his pistol from within his robes and aiming it between Ben's eyes. Ben looked down the barrel of the exorcist's pistol and wondered if this was it, if this was finally the time he was going to die. F it. I managed to survive twice, that's more than most people, he thought as he looked at the pistol's owner and glared at him with all the hate he could muster. He wanted Fried to show that, even at the end, he wasn't afraid of him. Ooh, you've got ball, kid, I'll give you that much, the insane exorcist laughed and lowered his pistol a little as he held Ben's glare unwaveringly. He then raised his pistol again and cocked it. I'm still gonna kill you though. Bang! When the end didn't come, Ben opened his eyes in confusion and saw a figure standing in front of him, a blade in their hand and facing Fried. He wiped the BLD from his face with the back of his sleeve and looked back to see Kiba. The blonde-haired knight glanced over his shoulder and smiled. Looks like I got here just in time. Ben then noted the crimson-red magic circle beside him where Kiba had, evidently, appeared from and saved him from Fried's bullet. As he looked at it, it glowed brighter as more figures started to emerge out of it. Oh my, you've got some ball messing with our newest member, Akino mused as she stepped out of the magic circle, quickly followed by Kaneko. Yay, an exorcist, she drawled without any emotion in her voice as she looked at Fried. Fried cackled insanely as he reached behind him for his blade that still held up Asia against the wall and pulled it out, causing Asia to fall to the ground with a faint cry of pain where she lay prone and watched the scene before her play out. Oh goody, the gang's all here. Now we can have a good OLF fest, he exclaimed as he pointed his light blade at Kiba, Akino and Kaneko. I wonder what it would feel like to shove my PP on your throat. My, you're quite a character, aren't you? Akino chuckled behind her hand though her eyes had a dangerous look in them as she looked at Fried. Fried smiled manically and licked his lips, an ecstatic look on his face. Oh yes, that's it. That's what I like to see. Nothing gets me going harder than a CC devil slot looking at me with such a murderous look in their eyes. I can't wait to rough up that pretty face of yours and take you on all fours like the beast you are. You're welcome to try. A familiar bolt of red energy was launched out of the, still active, magic circle and headed straight for Fried. OSHT, the exorcist cried as he dove out of the way of the blast which missed him by inches as it carried on its destructive path and struck the far wall which disintegrated instantly, leaving behind a large hole. But you don't have the ball to follow through. Rias, Ben wheezed as the last of his strength finally left him and he fell to the floor as he lost his weak grip on the couch. Ben. In his rapidly deteriorating state, Ben could no longer recognize who owned the voice which called out his name, but he could faintly make out the feminine hands which entered his view and gently cup his cheeks and tenderly raise his head until he found himself looking into familiar eyes. Rias? It's okay. I'm here, she told him soothingly as she stroked his bloody cheeks reassuringly with her soft thumbs. I'm sorry, he wheezed weakly, not noting the small specks of blood which landed on her face. Rias didn't seem to notice them either as she continued to soothe Ben, doing everything in her power to remain composed at the sight of her servant so badly hurt. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Not your fault. Yes, it is. I unknowingly sent you into the arms of an exorcist completely alone. Please forgive me. I wasn't expecting you to show your tip so soon, Gremory. What gives, you gate-crashing our little party? Rias didn't turn around to face the exorcist, but her face revealed, at least a little, of the fury she felt as she looked at Ben. You dare hurt my beloved servant? It's kinda my job, lady, Fried replied nonchalantly as he spun his blade around in his hand. You didn't answer my question though, how'd you get here so quick? Your barrier wasn't completed. It broke easily and revealed what was happening here. What? Fried retorted, his gleeful confidence gone from his face and replaced by a look of manic fury. He spun around, away from the devils glaring at him, and strode over to Asia angrily before kicking her in the face. Asia cried out in pain as she covered her head with her arms for protection, but Fried paid no notice to this as he then began raining down blow after blow on the defenseless girl, so lost in his anger at her failure. You were supposed to put up the barrier. You beach. Fried exclaimed, punctuating each word with another heavy kick to the prone nun, completely ignoring Rias as she gently released her hold on Ben's face, stood up and turned to face Fried with a dark crimson aura surrounding her person. The fact you hurt my beloved servant is reason enough to annihilate you, exorcist, but the one thing I hate more than that is those who hurt the weak and defenseless. Prepare yourself for oblivion. She summoned a dark red ball of energy in her hand, and when Fried noticed it, he stepped away from Asia in frustration at how outnumbered he was. Just as he was thinking he could do with some backup of his own. Fallen angels are on their way, Kaneko stated as she sniffed the air around her. What? You're involved with fallen angels? Rias retorted, glaring at Fried angrily. You're DMN right, beach. We're all great buds right now, and you've got a shitload of light weapons on the menu. What the plan? Kiba asked, backing away from Fried to the group even as they saw a dark magic circle start to form between himself and Fried, who was cackling gleefully. Rias clenched her fist tightly, furious at the situation she was in. The fallen angels had been in her territory and a thorn in her side far too long, and she wanted more than to finally deal with them. However, she knew she still couldn't do anything right now that could risk damaging the fragile ceasefire between the three factions. Rias? Rias brought herself out of her rapid thoughts at the sound of Aquino beside her and quickly understood her priorities right now. We can't deal with them now. The important thing right now is getting Ben to safety. Aquino, prepare to get us out of here. You got it, Aquino replied even as she began casting the teleportation circle. Kaneko. I need you help me get Ben to the portal. Sure, Kaneko nodded as she rushed over to Ben and, taking great care with his injuries, helped Rias get Ben off the floor before she gently picked him up bridal style. Ignoring the blood that stained her uniform, and carefully walked over to the magic circle being formed. As his head hung limply on Kaneko's shoulder, Ben locked his one free eye remaining with Asia, who was staring at him, tearfully yet with a look of relief on her face. Weakly he tried raising his arm hanging limply around Kaniko's shoulder and reaching out for the blonde-haired nun. Wait. Can't. Leave. Asia, he gasped, each word taking a lot of effort to express through the pain roaring within him. Rias cast a quick look at the nearly complete magic circle, then over at Asia, a sorrowful expression on her face. I'm sorry, Ben. I wish we could, but the circle only works for those with the Gremory crest and it would take too long to change it. At these words, Ben tried to say sorry to Asia, but all he saw was a flash of red light before Asia, freed, and the room vanished as he was teleported away. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 5. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Dragneil Giant 96 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.